With early voting kicking into high gear this week, you've made the right decision to join us in the smoke-filled room because we've got a lot to cover. And because of that, we've got an awesome group of political experts to join us. I'm going to introduce them one by one, starting with Brad Knolhoff. He's the Clinton County Board Chairman, which he's held that role since 2022. He's also active in the Clinton County GOP. Brad, thanks for being with us.
Yep. Thanks, Collin. Thanks, Michael, for getting me involved in this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Everything's always Michael's fault.
Yeah.
We also have returning, so either he's crazy or we're crazy or both, but returning to join us is Collin Mosely. He's the director of the Illinois Freedom Caucus. Collin, what's going on, man?
Hey, good to be here. We're right in the thick of spring session and primary season, so it's a good time to be in politics.
Yeah, well, certainly if you're sleeping during this political season or during this week or this time in politics, that means you just don't have enough clients, right? Speaking of having clients, we've got Dennis Cook. He's the president of Strive Strategies Group. Also has served in a number of leadership roles in the Young Republicans, both at the state and national level. Dennis, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Collin. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Glad to have you. I love the studio look. I mentioned earlier as we're getting set up, you're putting us all to shame on our Zooms. You've got the sexy studio.
My partner was like, we got to put the studio in house to work here. I was like, I'm gonna have some fun with this today. So, we'll see how long it stays out. We'll see if that thing zips out. We'll see.
It always happens, right? I'm going to send you some hate text messages when Lane calls me after this because he's been trying to get me to go into the studio for these things. But I'm like, I don't want to drive to the studio every Thursday. So if he makes me go, I'm going to blame
live like a block away from the office, Collin.
But I have to actually put on pants. Who wants to put on pants? Now you're all wondering, right? Speaking of Chris,
wearing pants.
At least we know one of us has pants on, so there you go. This is the pantsless episode, other than Dennis, of the smoke-filled room.
Are all of them pantsless?
I mean, for me, but I don't know. Speaking of wearing pants, we've also got Michael Butler and Chris Jackowiak. They are Cor Strategies political experts, and they weren't able to join us last week, so they are barreling down the door to share their opinions this week, I'm sure. Good to see you guys.
Absolutely.
All right, let's get right into it. So anybody who's watched more than 5 seconds of our SFRs knows that the whole point of this is to talk Illinois politics. So I hate talking about national politics. That said, there was a national development this week that likely will have an impact on Illinois in the primary and for sure will have an impact on the general in Illinois. So we got to talk about it. Nikki Haley has officially dropped out. That makes Trump the unofficial and probably soon official GOP nominee for president. So I know, Chris, you probably want to take a victory lap. Michael, you want to take a victory lap? Go for it, guys.
You go first. I'll go second.
I mean, I think it was inevitable from the beginning, and it took a little longer than people expected, just because some people were stubborn and refused to drop out. But it finally happened, and here we are. So it's all aboard the Trump train. Everybody's welcome. Let's put America first.
It couldn't have come at a better time, too, because I get to be on the podcast this week and remind Collin he's been wrong about this race the entire time. Collin's been Nikki Haley's biggest supporter since she announced for president. It's just so great to see.
The only one.
Yeah, evidently the one of about 12 people. So I'm just glad to see Nikki Haley finally out of the race. We can actually have a serious conversation going into the general election, and Trump can start moving shifting the messaging from primary to general election, which he's already been kind of doing. But the real question is, how is this going to affect things in Illinois in a couple weeks? Does this mean all the moderates are going to stay home, the moderates that are left in the Republican Party? Does this mean only the most conservative people are going to show up? I've been going back and forth on this issue myself, but I think this definitely benefits grassroots conservative candidates in this state because, who else? No Nikki Haley supporter is going to show up to vote at this point, all 5 of them.
Well, what do you guys think? I mean, we'll talk general in a second, but I think the question that's on everybody's minds is how does this impact the primary? Obviously we've got the Illinois primary in a week and a half from when this podcast airs. Does this have an impact on the primary electorate?
I think to Chris's point, when he says all 5 of them, he's probably not that far off. I mean, it's kind of like this is the least breaking news. And I know we're going to get into this later, but the question is maybe the minuscule numbers of how does this affect the congressional primary for specific people that are swinging one way or another without Haley in the race. But ultimately, I don't see it being that big of a factor statewide, the primary.
Yeah, I kind of would agree with that. I think the people who are engaged and motivated are going to stay engaged and motivated at this point. Like I don't, except for downstate, maybe that. Even then, hearing some of the numbers and polling numbers out of the Bailey Bost race, like even then, like I don't know how many people decide to say the moderate wise saying I'm not gonna run or not run, go out and vote. Because again, these primaries, as we all know, who've been doing this forever, seniors are the ones that vote, especially in these primary elections, right? So that subset's coming out no matter what. I think they're going to be more motivated than ever to come out after what they've seen the last couple of years. So that's just.
I think that's a fair point. What do you think, Brett?
I agree with that. Nobody that I talk to is talking about, well, I got to get to the primary to go vote for, Haley or Trump. They're talking about the other local races, the contested races. So I think it has no effect on anybody's campaign. It is what it is. And like you said, now we know where we're going and it's time to move forward.
Yeah, I mean, you think about races, and as you said, Collin, we'll talk about aisle 12 in a second, but you think about races where there are other big races on the ballot. To your point, Brad, people are going to be coming out either way, but that's not, I mean, that's a minority of the state. When you look at, if we can get to this Hunter agenda, which we've got so much, I doubt we'll get there, but if we can get to this, there are so few contested races on the ballot right now in the primary. One of our most loyal watchers, who's been a friend of mine for years, shot me a message and said, hey, I pulled a Dem ballot because I live in Cook County and I wanted to vote for Eileen O'Neill Burke in the primary for state's attorney. Don't kick me out, and can I still watch your podcast? Because there's nothing on the Republican ballot for him in Cook County, and that's most of the state where there just aren't races on the ballot. So I think you're going to see statewide very low turnout just because there's no races to go for. But in these contested districts like aisle 12 and others, I don't know how much of an impact this will have. I think you guys are pretty spot on that. Since we're talking about it, let's talk about the impact on the general. And Dennis, I want to start with you on this because I know you do a lot of your politics in the suburbs like we do. Trump on the ballot in the general election in most areas, maybe a little less so in the south suburbs, but in most areas of Chicagoland, isn't going to be a huge benefit for us. What do you think?
You're still going to have the challenges that you had 4 years ago, right? But then you take a district like Reboletti's district. I think I don't know if it's going to be as hurtful as it was 4 years ago, right? I don't think you had a 17-point loss all across DuPage County for Trump 4 years ago. I don't think necessarily we get to that level bad in DuPage. Like I think people have kind of woken up. You're seeing this all over the place, right, across the country. People are finally questioning all of it, right? And I think they're willing to say, like, Trump, I may not agree with him personally, but his policies were right. And some of these individuals are in the suburb, in Reboletti's district, are like, I'm going to listen more. I'm going to give somebody like Dennis Reboletti, more of a moderate Republican, a chance to make his case. I think you've had on your previous podcast, you've talked about that race where it's going to be a tier one, and it's going to be interesting to see how he's able to move suburban women into his corner.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of the best pickup opportunities Republicans have in that district. So I think what I've heard from a lot of people, and I think this is true, and I'm curious what you guys think, is if you look at the previous elections, it was a known versus an unknown. Biden, to most voters, they just liked the guy. They didn't know his policies. They just liked Sleepy Joe, whereas you knew Trump. So a lot of people were voting against Trump. This time around, that's not the case. People dislike Biden and dislike Trump. And so that will change the dynamic a bit where, yes, people don't like Trump, but they also don't love Biden either. And unless Democrats pull a switcheroo, which is still within the realm of possibility, but if it is Biden-Trump, I do think the Trump impact will be less than it was 4 years ago. So I think you're right, Dennis.
Well, I think one of the things that's interesting about this one is that, like, it's really basically like an incumbent versus an incumbent. You've seen both of them as president. You've seen the job that they've done, and voters have to make a decision on, do I think that Trump did a better job or do I think that Biden did a better job? And it's really hard to make the case that Biden has done a better job as president than Trump did. I mean, you just look at every metric and it's like, okay, well, I was better off in every way. And you may not like his temperament or how he says things or what he posts on Truth Social or whatever it is, but he's the right man for the job.
It's that you can say I don't like what he posted on Truth Social, but I don't like Biden's policies, right?
Yeah,
right. Well, I agree.
I think when it gets to the kitchen table, people are feeling the effects of Biden's policies now. When it gets to the kitchen table, they didn't have that 4 years ago to vote on. They didn't have 8% inflation and skyrocketing prices everywhere you go. So it's you can't compare this to 4 years ago because we are in drastically different times today.
Well, and to the point you guys are making, there's been some polling the last couple of weeks that have asked these specific questions. Do you remember, are you happier in Biden's economy or in Trump's economy? And the numbers have been really rock solid on Trump's side, which is why in most battleground states, Trump is leading. I mean, I've been saying, Chris is right, that I've been crossing my fingers, hoping someone other than Trump would be the candidate. So he's right about that. But I have been saying, and Chris, you can even admit this, I have been saying that if it is Trump-Biden, Trump will win. And all the numbers right now bear that out. The problem is, that's nationwide, and that's in battleground states. But we're talking DuPage County, or, Dennis brought up House District 45, which is one of our biggest races we got to win. You got to look at in the local areas. Does Trump hurt you in some areas where he maybe helps you in some others? And that's the challenge for Illinois Republicans, is in some of these key districts, he won't hurt us as bad as 4 years ago, but that doesn't mean he isn't going to hurt us. Colin, just real quick, Colin, you've been trying to jump in. Go ahead, and then we'll get over to you, Dennis.
All I was going to say earlier was, I think when you take the fact, I think Michael's right. You got basically incumbent on incumbent. What I'm looking forward to seeing is the 2016 campaign Trump, as far as coming in, hammering Joe Biden on policy, failure. I mean, I think if he does that, he defeats Joe Biden hands down. Like a 2016 on message, sharp Donald Trump.
I personally think this all becomes mute, everything we're talking about right now. The case is Trump Biden, but I think we all see where this is going. I have a hard time believing.
Are you a conspiracy nut like
I'm not
I
a
am?
conspiracy theorist, but if you just watch and you see how even the mainstream media is going after Biden and his age.
Yeah.
They're doing it
and you saw
increasingly
SNL
more.
conveniently had a Gavin Newsom, actor play Gavin Newsom this past weekend. The groundwork's being laid for sure. If they pull the trigger, I don't know, but the groundwork is absolutely being laid.
The two things I wanted to get in here is the first one is, don't underestimate how low DuPage County can go. We're talking optimistically about DuPage County. I know Abby Oliver's watching this. I'm sorry, but I'm very bearish on DuPage County. I expect us to lose ground in DuPage County, just because that's just how things are at over there. The second thing is, we talk about how people are disgruntled with both Trump and Biden. One of the biggest factors in the general election is going to be how many people decide, if they do show up to vote third party. No Labels is still talking about running their own candidate. Who that candidate is, we don't really know yet, but I know they're talking to Nikki Haley. I know they talked to Joe Manchin. They're going to see if No Labels comes out with a candidate. And even if they don't, RFK Jr. is still going to be on the ballot. He's polling pretty significantly in some of these polls.
And he's talking about maybe running as a libertarian.
He is? I didn't see that.
I heard that.
Oh,
yeah.
But either way, the question is going to be is, if people show up to vote and they don't vote for either Trump or Biden, they vote for a major third party. By major, I mean 5+% of the vote. Who are they going to vote for down ballot? Are they going to vote their pocketbook and maybe vote Republican, or are they going to vote their feelings and vote Democrat? That's going to be the big conversation had general election time, and who that person is going to be taking votes away from at the top of the ticket.
Yeah. So something to think about, is the way Illinois law is set. If a major or if a third party gets 5% of the vote, they're automatically allowed on the ballot the next time around, and they get way easier petition requirements in the next election. We saw this with the Conservative Party when McCann, who's on his way to prison, ran as a Conservative Party candidate. I mean, if this happens, if one of the candidates for president gets 5% or more of the vote, that could have a long-term impact in Illinois politics, especially if it's a Libertarian Party candidate or something that sounds more conservative. That'll hurt Republicans. So I don't know yet if this is going to be a factor, but it's, Chris, to your point, it's something we should definitely keep an eye on, because this could have a long-term impact. Dennis, you want to close us out on this? I know you were trying to jump in a couple times and people talked over you.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the point about how bad DuPage is, right? It was bad when you go back to 4 years ago. I mean, using an example, the judicial races some of those races would have been successful had Trump not lost a county by more than 15%. You can go back and you can look at the numbers. When Trump was just shy of 15%, McCluskey was ahead. When that 2 points went to 17, he got smoked. He lost by 900 votes, about 1,500 votes, maybe a little bit more. What I'm trying to say is, I mean, it's still math. That math still applies to the county. The organizations are they're less stronger than they were in 20. So, I mean, I think that I just don't think it's good. It's going to be as bad. I don't think I don't think it could get any worse. I'll argue that point. I don't think it could get any worse than DuPage.
Well, you
Structurally,
can, to your point,
well, I
the
mean,
optimism.
maybe for another time he can. I mean, look, I'm a Cook County Republican. I'm not a DuPage guy, right? So I have my own issues, right, in Cook County. But I mean, in DuPage, like, I think that's another line item for another day where I think you could fill in a whole hour just on DuPage Republican issues, right?
He won't let me.
There's no
He
doubt
won't
about
let
that.
me, Dennis.
Oh, we let you plenty. We let
He
you
won't let
plenty.
me. He won't let me have my hour of hate on DuPage County Republicans because they don't like me. Come on.
Well, all I can say is you can only outperform the top of the ticket by so much. And we do this, I can't wait for the next election we have, because it will be many of our first, where we don't have to keep outperforming the top. We could actually maybe have a candidate at the top who has coattails instead of having to constantly be like, how much can we outperform the top of our ticket? Because whether it's gubernatorial or presidential, it seems like it's always the case for us as Republicans in Illinois. We'll close this topic with this, the quote from Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker on MSNBC. "We want Trump on the ballot, frankly, because he's a detriment to Republicans across the United States." Democrats get this. They understand that while Trump may win the presidency, and they're happy to make that sacrifice, in most battleground areas of the country, he's going to hurt us in districts that we have that we've got to flip. So this is a challenge here. Democrats know it, and we're going to have to find some way to overcome it. I know some of you guys brought up IL-12. Let's talk about it. Let's jump in. There was some polling recently that showed that Bost was up by 6 in this race, and when you dump in the undecideds, he's up by 8. This is about what we've been hearing from other sources. Obviously, we did some polling a while ago that had Bost right around here as well. Bost people think that they're a little bit higher up than this. The Bailey peoples continue to claim that they're up. Obviously, everyone's going to sort of have their own spin a week and a half before Election Day, but that's the point here. We're a week and a half before Election Day. This thing, we're going to know in just a week and a half. So let's open it up. Who's got thoughts? I'm sure everybody does on IL-12.
Has anyone seen the campaign finance numbers today? Did those become available today for last quarter?
You talking about the pre-election FEC reports?
Yeah,
Well, yeah,
today's
like
the
this.
deadline, so I don't know that they've actually been, posted yet. I haven't looked, though.
Because Bailey's been making some ad buys and things like that. And I've been curious to see exactly what the dollar for dollar, is on that race, as we have a week and a half left. That poll that M3 released showed some significant factor changes with the Haley in or out. So that's going to be interesting too. But I think ultimately, and this is my prediction, I could be way wrong on this, but I've said all along the race will be 6 or 7 points max, is what I think. But hey, I've been wrong before.
Well, the ironic thing is you can sort of stumble into correct predictions. And the ironic thing is I do think this poll is a little soft on Bost numbers, but I also know that Bailey has overperformed the polls every time he's been on the ballot. So I think if you had an accurate poll, it would show Bost up by 9 or 10 or 11, but Bailey's going to overperform and end up winning by 6 or 7. And then this pollster is going to go around saying, look, I got it right. And, at the end of the day, I'm sorry, I hope I said Bost and not Bailey. I think Bost will win by 6 or 7.
You heard it here first. Collin Corbett said he calls the race for Darren.
Did I say Bailey? No, Bost will win by 6 or 7, and this pollster will claim that they got it exactly right, when in truth they were actually off a little bit. But turnout will favor Bailey, especially as you said, with Haley dropping out. That might cost Bost a few votes. But I think this is going to end up right where it is, Collin. I don't think you're wrong. I think we're looking at 6 or 7 points for Bost, which is a decent showing for Bailey against an incumbent congressman who blew him out the water with dollars. And if Trump had endorsed the other way around, this race might look differently.
And can I just add one quick thing real too, is I think that there is and always has been a path to victory for Bailey. I think that it absolutely exists. What it is in the next week and a half to make the numbers go his way, that I don't know. And that's why I'm curious on the money. But we'll find out.
Yeah,
I just think you look at this poll and you look at this poll and then some of the other polls that have been released publicly over the course of this campaign, and there really hasn't been like any significant movement. Like it seems like a lot of people were kind of just locked in from the beginning. There were some undecideds. It looks like those undecideds are breaking towards Bost, which makes sense because, he's been up on TV and in mailboxes and Darren hasn't.
You say, but let's be clear. You say breaking towards Bost. We're only talking about a 2% number here, so they're not breaking heavy towards Bost. They are breaking towards Bost, but it's not heavy.
Sure.
I mean, but which I think, Michael, proves your point that this race has been locked in since the beginning. I mean, we've seen the polling and we watched it happen between Miller and Davis during that primary, where every poll you took, Miller was gaining a little bit, Davis was dropping a little bit. There was constant movement in those polls over months. Whereas in the Bost Bailey race, these numbers have just basically not changed since the beginning. So I think you're making a really valid point.
Well, and I also think that, like if you look at how Mary ran that race against Rodney, she had her like talking points. She stuck to them all the way through. She was consistently on message. Whereas the Bailey campaign, their attacks have kind of been every couple of weeks, there's something new. They're trying something different. And when you've got that subset of, 16% that's undecided and they're hearing 27 different reasons. I mean, Darren himself is saying, I'm going to post a different reason every day for the last, 20 days on why not to vote for Mike Bost. Well, it's hard to get any penetration with those voters whenever you've got 20 different reasons and you've got no money to put any of them out there.
It's hard to get, if you don't get frequency with your message, the voters are not going to remember it. So the concept of, I always hate that. I'm going to post one reason a day, or here's the long list. No voter pays attention to all that. If you've got a solid message, you're making 1 to 3 points and you're making them constantly from start to finish. And that hasn't been, a success of this campaign on the Bailey side.
Right.
Brad, what were you saying?
No, this is a race. I live in the district. I actually know both Darren and Mike. And, for me, I could have almost been looked at as this undecided voter. And it wasn't undecided because I didn't know them. It's because I knew both of them. And I think that's where you're seeing a lot of your undecideds come from. So to that point, in my mind, I've been back and forth. And so I don't think the Bailey's message really hurts, because there's been days I've seen what he put out as his reason for today. And he had a good point. But then you see a counter from Mike. I think at the end of the day, this race is going to depend on who shows up. If you get a younger electorate to show up, Bailey could tweak one out, and I agree with Collin. I think it's going to be a little closer than a lot of people believe. And that's why you hear Mike saying, make sure you get out and vote. Well, you hear both of them say it, but they're very adamant. This is important. I think they know that. Both of them know that. So.
And I'm curious, I've been interested on, the poll factors there on the age ranges. The young voters, like, I'm 22, is it a style thing? Why we like Darren so much more than Mike? And then in the older crowd, Mike's been on TV for how long, and who is the crowd sitting in front of Fox News watching commercials all day? Well, it's the 60-year-olds and, that crowd. So I suppose the metrics make sense. But like Brad said, at the end of the day, which crowd gets to the polls? Which crowd has voted early? And, I don't know. We're TBD. We'll find out that night. That's what's so exciting for all of us. I guess we'll understand.
If you're a good campaign, and I'm not plugged into either campaign, but if you're a good campaign, you've got the early voting numbers. They could tell us right now. We're recording on Thursday. This is released on Friday. If they know what they're doing, they've got the early voting numbers for the first week, and they can tell you, and they've got the vote by mail numbers, and they can tell you which groups have been showing up. So I bet you both these campaigns have that data. I know the Bost campaign has it. They're sophisticated enough to have pulled these numbers. So they know, is it trending older? Is it trending younger? I'm sure they've looked at those numbers and they've got a pretty good idea. I look at you guys on this podcast, and we're all pretty politically savvy. We've been around for a while. Very rarely do you have a race that on election night, you don't know how it's going to go. You've looked at early voting numbers. You've looked at vote by mail numbers. Even if you're telling your client, it's okay, it might happen. We're down by 6, we're up by 7. You know where you're at. So you could pull those VBM and EV numbers right now, and we could have a good idea. Maybe by next week, we try to see if we can get our hands on those numbers before next week's podcast and just see who's showing up to vote in that race, because it could give people a preview of where the race is going to go.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, Dennis, any thoughts on aisle 12 before we move to the next topic? We got some Cook County topics. I know you guys are saving your bullets for those.
I just think it's going to be closer. I can see a 3-point margin in that race. I think Bost wins, but I think it's the older demographic that pulls them across. The younger demographic, we've all sit here and say, well, if the young people come out, they don't. You see them in the polls all the time. They're there, but that's not enough. It's not going to happen. Just being realistic when it comes to that demographic. But I see it being more likely like a 3 or 4 point victory.
The only thing I'll add on aisle 12 is we're talking about the pre-primary reports. if Darren Bailey is showing that he's dumping like $250,000 of his own money into this race, like he probably should have a long time ago if he wanted to be competitive, then I'd start leaning towards this race is going to be pretty close, or onto Colin's Mosely's point that he might actually have a path to victory here. If I don't see that, I'm going to go with my instinct, and like I said a couple weeks ago, that this race is over. Trump's endorsement matters. That Bailey does not have a path. But if he does what he should have done months ago and puts his money in, maybe there's a path.
Yeah, listen, I do think I have heard that from a few people, Chris, that if the guy believed he had a shot, he would have put his own money in. I've heard that a handful of times, and it's growing. The chorus is growing a little bit. Now, listen, I tell every candidate that I work with, that's your money. You do with it as you please. Put it in or don't put it in. I'm not going to judge you for that. So, I don't judge Darren for it, but it is a narrative that is starting to pop up that, people know he does have some scratch. He's not poor. The fact that he hasn't put significant funds into the race, that is something people are pointing to as maybe he doesn't even believe that he's got a shot here. Again, I'm not saying I believe it. I think it's going to be close. Dennis, I wouldn't be shocked if it was 3 points. I think the window there is like 3 to 9, and I put it right in the center there at about 6 that Bost wins by. But I wouldn't be shocked if Bost wins by 9, and I wouldn't be shocked if he only wins by 2 or 3. It's kind of in that range. But as we've talked about before, I mean, while Darren is always great at outperforming polls because he's good at getting propensity, getting people to the polls. Bost has a very, very good campaign apparatus, and we haven't talked about it in a while. 2 years ago in 2022, the data shows he ran the strongest congressional race of any of the congressional candidates on the Republican side. He's got an apparatus and he gets people to the polls. So he very well may overperform his poll numbers too, which then brings you back to a 7 or 8 or 9 point win. So we'll see.
Can I ask, I don't want to beat this to death, but I'm curious to get your thoughts. What happens if this race is only 3 or 4 points? Well, and one way or another, what does that mean for the tone of the district down there? Are we thinking is this still in play for these primaries in the future, or because I mean, arguably, if Mike wins this race by larger numbers than we're predicting, then different vibe down there. But what does this do for the IL-12 in the future?
It's a fair question.
If Bailey loses by only 2 or 3 points, his campaign team needs to be tried for political malpractice. Because if you're losing by 2 or 3 points, spending zero money and just having Darren go up on Facebook ads and pretend that Trump likes him, then you should have won this race by 15 points, if that's what your result is. So they need to be tried for political malpractice if that happened. In terms of next cycle, I wouldn't be surprised if Darren makes a comeback if it's in 2 or 3 points. Then he has momentum. He can show donors, hey, you didn't give me money last time, and this is the margin I got. Give money to me this time, and I'll finally take out Mike Bost.
I mean, honestly, so much of this is driven by national politics, right? I mean, if we're talking 6, 7, 8 years ago in a district like this, we'd say Bost is safe by 20 points, no matter who Rick challenges him. If the Republican Party continues trending more towards Trumpism, then you could see that Bost could be in trouble. If instead, let's say Trump loses the general or something happens, he's not in the White House, maybe now Bost is in a better position versus a worse position. I think it's hard to predict where we're going to be in 2 years, sort of with the margins. All I can say is, personally, I assume Darren's going to run for something in 2026 because Darren can't not run for something. So I hope it's IL-12. I'm sorry to Mike Bost and his team, but if we can contain the damage there versus him running for governor in 2026, that would make me very happy. So I'm sorry to Mike Bost and his team, but I almost hope he runs for IL-12 again so he doesn't run for Senate or governor. That's my position. Anyways, let's keep moving. I mentioned Cook County. This same pollster did a poll in Cook County, and I know Chris has been wanting to talk about the state's attorney's race in Cook County for forever. So let's let him have a chance to talk about it. Dennis and I also live in Cook County, so I'm sure we also have some thoughts here on the state's attorney race. I also want to talk about why it matters for the GOP, because the pollster showed that the candidates, Eileen O'Neill Burke and Clayton Harris on the Democratic side, are tied 21-21 with 58% undecided. The reason why we've been watching this race very closely is the nominee is going to have a big impact in Cook County. If Clayton Harris is the nominee, he is Kim Foxx's choice. He is her acolyte in many ways. And if he's the nominee for state's attorney, that's going to help a lot of Republican candidates in the county, especially judicial candidates who are going to be down ballot from this. It can use Kim Foxx and Clayton Harris and crime as an issue to run against. If Eileen O'Neill Burke is the nominee, she's a much more palatable, much more middle-of-the-road candidate who won't hurt Democrats in the general as much as Harris will. And so many of us in Cook County have been watching this race because down ballot, As much as O'Neill Burke will make a better state's attorney, Clayton Harris will really help our Republican candidates down ballot. So we'd love to see Clayton Harris pull this out. So that's why this race matters for Republicans. Chris, why don't you kick us off on why is this race even tied, considering O'Neill Burke has raised tons of money. She's had a lot of endorsements and support. How is she only tied with her opponent?
So the first answer I'm going to give is that how you just described Clayton Harris is much better messaging than anything Burke's camp has put out this entire cycle so far. You calling him Kim Foxx's choice and the choice of, the next Kim Foxx, that is 10 times better than the abortion orientated messaging that Burke's camp has been putting out there this entire time.
Well, Chris, it's almost whenever I see a candidate do that sort of defensive, I'm not bad on abortion. It's putting you on the defensive. Everyone knows your first thing you're taught in politics when you're an intern is when you're playing defense, you're losing. Everybody knows this on this podcast. And yet I see this in these races where you see Republicans do it in the general election. You see Democrats now doing it in their primaries. I promise I'm not bad on this issue. It's just so defensive. It doesn't work.
Yeah. And I understand why they did this. They saw Paul Vallis lose and say, I do not want to beat Paul Vallis. I don't want them to call me a Republican. I understand that. But when more people know that you're pro-choice than that they know that you're tough on crime, that's the issue. Now, that being said, I'm not sure if I 100% agree with this poll. The fact that there is a higher name ID and a lower number of undecideds for the circuit clerk race than there is for the state's attorney's race, that doesn't make sense to me. This has been a race that's been built up for months as the top race in Cook County. And if, in fact, this is accurate, if Podgorski's right that it's 21-21 with 58% undecided, Burke has lost this race. She's going to lose by 10 points. She's done. Because you cannot be at 21% in a poll when your core messaging is supposed to be, I am going to be tough on crime. I am better than the previous state's attorney. The market for that vote is so vast. She should be at like 45%. Harris should be at 30%, considering the campaign that Harris has ran, which is to say no campaign.
Yeah.
Instead, we're looking at 21-21, which actually means Burke is down because Harris will overperform any poll that's he's in because of he's going to get the backing of progressives and he's getting the backing of the black demographic, which is going to show up to
and with the Dem machine behind him, those Democratic voters are going to go in the polling booth with those sample ballots and do whatever the machine told them to do. So he will significantly overperform any poll. You're totally right.
So if this poll is accurate, which please God, let it not be accurate. Please let it not be true. But when I look at the results they had for the circuit clerk and the Supreme Court, they looked right to me. If this is true, Burke is done. She's lost. Like I will talk on election night about how to lose a state's attorney's race because Burke did it. But maybe, just maybe, enough people like the person you mentioned earlier are saying, I need to vote in a Democratic primary. I need to vote for Eileen Burke. This can't go on any longer. Hopefully that's the case. And I'm praying to the Lord it's true. But this has got me so pessimistic now.
It's another one of those situations where you look at the campaign like a Burke and you're like, why did you wait so long to blow the cap if that was the case? And get you got to get this message out sooner. Like, people are just waiting way too long to jumpstart an effort of a campaign that size. Like, what were you waiting for? Like, people are like, well, people aren't listening. You got to drive this message. You have the money now. You're like, even the messaging that's out there, it's terrible. Like, I'm sitting there like, what are you trying to do? You're trying to win, but you're trying not to make people upset in your own party too. It's like, well, you're not going to win with that message.
There are flashes of great messaging in this campaign. At the end of the debate, which nobody watched except for me, unfortunately, at the end of the debate, Burke's line in her closing statement was, if you think everything is fine with crime in Cook County, vote for Harris. If you think things are bad, vote for me. That should have been the message of this entire campaign, and yet it's only seen at the end of a debate that nobody watched. The other thing I have to mention is I was around in Cook County politics in 2020 when Bill Conway was doing the same thing versus Fox. And people were screaming at Bill Conway that you can't just rely on TV. You need a better, campaign apparatus. But even with Bill Conway's, TV reliant campaign, he had a grassroots effort of Kim Foxx is terrible. I am going to go to the polls for this guy. Burke, from what I'm seeing currently, does not have that. She isn't getting people worked up enough. She's not raising awareness that there's a new day in the state's attorney's office coming. And because of that, if she loses and this poll is right, then that's why.
Yeah, listen, we talk about it
election.
all the time. The quality of your campaign matters. And in this race, Harris has run no campaign, just relying on the Democratic endorsement, and Harris has and Burke has run a bad campaign. I mean, you have everything going for you. You can go into, I mean, the places that care about crime right now are Black wards, Black communities. That's where people care about crime. You could go in there and weaken your opponent's base. If he can't count on his base to come out for him, you could go in with a crime message and really weaken him in his base, and then go out and win the seniors, the Hispanics, etc. But one thing I saw in this poll that was mentioned in the crosstabs was that Burke support's coming from seniors and Hispanics and whites, and Harris's support is coming from younger voters and Black voters. That tells me again that Harris is going to overperform and Burke is going to underperform, because Hispanics are not showing up right now in primaries, whereas Black voters are kind of showing up. In a Democratic presidential primary, young voters will mostly show up. I think for a number of reasons. I'm looking at this poll saying this race is done. And again, the reason why I bring this up is not only to get Chris off my back and let him talk about this race, it's also because if the nominee for this is Clayton Harris, this is a big win for Republicans in Cook County, because it allows us to keep talking about the Kim Foxx and the fails of her agenda in Cook County, and it's going to gain us points down ballot. So this looks like it could be a good thing for Cook County Republicans.
I have to add 2 extra points here. The first one is you got to hope that Chewy's primary campaign might boost Hispanic turnout a little bit. Hopefully that's the hope. But if they're Chewy voters, maybe they'll vote for Harris anyway, so you can't really rely on that. The second thing is, the saddest thing about this entire race, like I mentioned earlier, is that it sounds like the Republicans have a better messaging strategy in place for Bob Fioretti than they do than the Democratic establishment has for Eileen O'Neill Burke. Where have our forefathers gone, people? What is happening?
All right, let's keep moving. Next on the agenda, we were going to talk about a Chicago topic with the transfer tax referendum, but I've been too nice to Chris, so we're skipping over that, if only to annoy Chris. Let's get into another political campaign topic. The IEA has been dumping a ton of money into House Districts 109 and 110. That is, 109 is the write-in race with Adam Niemerg against Jim Acklin.
102.
I'm sorry, it's 102. There we go. All right, 102. Thank you. Glad you're here. That's 102. And then 110 is Blaine Wilhauer against Matt Hall. 2 of the biggest Republican primaries, certainly in the region, if not the state. And we're looking at what, like a $250,000 basically being dropped into these 2 races on the IEA side. Meanwhile, there's some support coming in especially on Wilhauer's side to make sure he pulls out that race. Doesn't seem like people are overly concerned about Niemerg, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I haven't seen a ton coming in on his side. So for those of you who are more in the know, who know exactly which district this is too, since my notes are wrong, let me know what's going on here with these races.
Well, first of all, I think, on the Adam Niemerg race, like a write-in campaign, when have we ever seen an incumbent state representative now in a write-in race with a heavily funded opponent? It's an anomaly, and so I think it'd be really interesting to see the results. But Jim Acklin has started getting money dumped into his campaign. They have officially went negative on Adam, which the ad style is the exact same as the Matt Hall ads against Blaine Wilhauer. It's
the same guy producing the ads, so it's not overly surprising.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and so I'm looking at reports right now, and I mean, another $60,000 this past week from unions, which the largest chunk again being from teachers unions for Matt and Acklin. But I think ultimately what I'm seeing in the 110 for sure is people aren't buying it. I know there was a poll done in the 110. I haven't seen the results of that yet. I'm told that it trends positive for the incumbent. But it's literally a carpet. Both of these races are carpet bombing, just media from the teachers unions candidates in Matt Hall and Jim Acklin. But the message that they're delivering, I don't think resonates with the voters in these districts. And they also are not buying what is even being, half truth. So
interesting.
From a personal standpoint, I've been to especially in the Wilhour Hall race. I've been to several Lincoln Day dinners, and it's pretty evident where the district's going when you're at those. I was at Effingham County. Collin mentioned who's funding Hall, and I don't even know if Hall believes he's not being bought by the unions. When he gave a speech, if any of you guys follow Tom DeVore, he posted his Lincoln Day speech on there, and he struggled to say he wasn't being bought by the unions. So, but both at Effingham and Fayette County, Blaine got very loud ovations, standing ovation in Fayette County, and that's their home turf. Both those guys are from Fayette County, and just on the ground, just as Collin said, people aren't buying it. So I think it's a lot of wasted money by the Chicago teachers unions. But I think the bigger thing in these races is, you guys might not believe this, but I think that this Chicago money, especially from these teachers unions, is starting to become a poison pill for some of these future campaigns. Because you saw some of the sitting Republicans kind of circle the wagons a little bit early on in these campaigns. And now they're starting to back away saying, oh, we don't know anything about this. And, I think they're getting nervous because this race has gone so far to the extreme of being outside funded that people are really catching on. You got websites like Sunshine and different websites like that. It's really exposing where this money flows. And I really think future elections, this could be used against other people who take this money because they're seeing the results of it.
To your point, Brad, one thing that I found is interesting. I remember when I ran my first race outside of the suburbs in central and then another race in southern Illinois, learning just how different the voters are. And fast forward now, I've got, been looking at polls and been doing politics statewide for long enough. It's secondhand for me as it is for you guys. But the first time I worked in politics outside of Chicagoland, it was eye-opening for me. And I think you're kind of seeing that here of some messaging and some campaign tactics and some narratives that, you would expect to see somebody coming out of Springfield or Chicago saying, oh, sure, this is going to work. And those of us who've done politics in these districts and these regions are like, do you even know the voters in these areas? Have you talked to any of them? Because this is not the kind of thing that's going to convince a Republican voter in these House districts to flip on their incumbent.
Yeah. And if you talk to the people down here in Southern Illinois, one of the top issues is, the effect of Chicago on the southern part of the state. And if you have campaigns that can effectively tie this money coming from Chicago and influencing these local races, that's really, I think, in these two races, that's what's swaying the electorate is they see where this money is starting to come from, and it's really swaying them, and it bothers them because that's a hot button issue is Chicago affecting Southern Illinois.
Yeah.
Right. And then the Nienberg race specifically, if they were going to make any effort at all to try to hide that connection, they screwed up on day one because the teachers unions, the person that they had object to Nienberg's petitions was literally the former Democrat chairperson of the Vermilion County Democrats. So right out of the gate, you're like, teachers unions partnering with Vermilion County Democrats to toss sitting conservative off the ballot. I mean, it's day one. Jim Ackland, his campaign a few weeks ago, when they finally decided to campaign, the first ad they ran, I think it was actually brilliant. They put a radio ad out that said, oh, hey, there's nobody on the ballot for state rep as a Republican. The Democrats are going to steal this seat, which is what happens if Jim Ackland wins. But now we have seen them start attacking Adam, and they're going so low with Adam and Blaine both as to drag in, a mistake they made when they were young, dumb college kids. It's getting personal, it's getting dirty, it's going to leave lots of wounds to heal with lots of people in 12 days.
Yeah, well, that's certainly going to be the story is, all these wounds from this primary. Let's shift over to another race, unless, Michael, you want to jump in real quick? Because I know you...
I would just say that it seems like, things are trending in Blaine and Adam's direction. I think that the unions pouring in all this money, like in the final 2 weeks, is probably evidence that they're not satisfied with, the position that their candidates are in. And I think to the outside money portion, like across the board down here, we have to do a better job of raising money locally, because I think even if you look at like the money that Blaine has gotten, well, Dick Uihlein gave $150,000 to Chris Miller, and then Chris Miller turned around and, gave 50 of it to Blaine. And I understand that Dick Uline's aligned with our values, but he's also from, the Chicagoland area. Like we need to kind of work on getting some people to pony up some of their cash in this region so we can make sure that we're being represented and it's not somebody from Lake County or Chicago that's calling the shots.
Yeah. Well, let's shift over to another race that's probably going to leave some hurt feelings one direction or another. Let's talk about 116. So you've got Severin against Angela Evans in that race. And if any race has dove headfirst into silly season, it's this race for sure. We talked about it last week with Angela Evans' radio ad. I'll certainly be curious with the new batch of guests what you guys think about that radio ad, but I hated it. I thought it was awful. Now she's getting some flack for getting an endorsement from somebody who way back in the day, as you said, Collin, but was part of a cross-burning incident, which never is a good look. And it looks like now those hurt feelings are starting to come over here with Darren Bailey and possibly Blaine Wilhauer getting involved and doing some things for Angela Evans against Dave Severin. It just seems like people are starting to say, fine, you know what, we're against each other. I'll show you what it looks like to be against each other. And, we all got to work together in 2 weeks. And I don't know how that's going to happen after these races. So what are you guys seeing in that race? And specifically too, is it going to have a lasting impact? I know people aren't saying they're overly concerned about Severin in that race, but the hurt feelings are going to last beyond March 19th.
Well,
I would say that Severin is up on TV. He's in mailboxes. Like Angela has gotten kind of a little bit of a influx of cash here at the end, from some of the sources that you had mentioned, but I just don't think that it's going to be enough. And if you kind of look at how her campaign is being run in these final weeks, it just seems like a lot of Hail Marys and oh, let me run this ad. Maybe it'll get me some attention, like those kind of things. And it's, I don't think it's working for her.
Yeah, I'm curious. The only reason why, you've got the Restore Illinois PAC sending mail, looks like Wilhauer might be shifting some funding over into this race. It doesn't look like Evans has got a great chance at this. So the only reason they would do that is to basically say, F you to Tony McCombie, the House Republicans, be like, fine, you guys want to tacitly support these attacks on us, then we'll come right back at you. I can't see any other reason why they would get involved in this race because Evans is not winning this race. Am I wrong?
To your point that you just made, because that's where I was going to interject too. I know just from being part of that circle that there was even a discussion in House Republican Political Caucus a few weeks ago where Leader McCombie has continued to assert that the Freedom Caucus recruited Angela, was behind her the whole time, yada, yada, yada. And I do think that at some point, I think I'm being a little bit speculative, but I think it upset people enough and that they were tired enough of her trying to pin the race on them that one member just decided, you know what, I'm in now. Dave Severin, Dave is a great guy. I like him, personally. He's a great guy, and I think that everyone that's involved in this situation would say the same thing. But policy wise and record wise, I think that's what they're challenging. They're challenging his record, which is what what we probably should do in politics instead of challenging someone's personal feelings. But at the end of the day, I think you're right on the head, Collin. I think it came down to inside baseball, hurt feeling, conflicts, and that's why you've seen this money come in.
Which then leads to the question: how does this all look on March 20th? I mean,
Right.
I don't see a lot of these seats changing. I think a lot of the incumbents are going to pull out these primaries, and so then everyone's still got to find a way to come back and work together on March 20th. And it's not like, let's talk about the House caucus down in Springfield. It's not like there was a lot of solid relationships between the Freedom Caucus and the full caucuses, if you can call it that, sort of describe it as that. And now you're going to have even more hurt feelings. And will people go their own way? Will you see leadership challenges? I mean, all this is going to have long-term impacts that people are going to have to deal with well beyond March 19th.
Well, let's just say a prayer that everyone comes together because we got a lot bigger enemies out there than what we're seeing now. So let's just cross our fingers.
I agree. And I think to the relationship point, it started last year, didn't start off this bad. There was actually some good communications. I mean, I'll say it personally, and now we hit a point where when you talk about coming together and working together, people have stopped returning my phone calls and texts. I haven't stopped returning theirs. So from a Freedom Caucus standpoint, that's where we're at after March 19th.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully you're right, Brad. I mean, this is why, as a Politico, I love primaries, but this is why there are people who hate primaries, because there are hurt feelings afterwards, and sometimes people can't get over it. I live in the world of, hey, it's politics. Like, we may be enemies until March 19th, but then let's grab a beer and like you said, Brad, the enemy's on the other side. Let's get over it. Get over your hurt feelings. But not everyone's capable of doing that.
We're not good at that.
Yeah.
We're not good at that at all.
Yeah. I posted a meme to our private Discord that was like, it was a scene from Wednesday, the Netflix show, which is surprisingly good. And it's like, it says, when people try to hurt your feelings, but you don't actually have feelings, and she's just sitting there drinking poison. So that's basically every Politico. Come on, if you still have feelings at this point, you're in the wrong business.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's jump back to Northern Illinois, and maybe Chris will get his chance here to make Oliver and others unhappy at him for talking bad about DuPage County. But we got to talk about this, because I have gotten no shortage of text messages, emails, phone calls about DuPage County, because there's been a lot happening to, we've talked about it before, Pete DiCianni, candidate for recorder, who's now a Democrat. He'd been a Republican for a long time. Now he's running as a Democrat for recorder. He had the Jesse White endorsement in his race, but just over the past week, Jesse White withdrew his endorsement over a incident that had happened in June of 2020. And now, just over the last week, now mailers that DiCianni had put out in his race against Greg Hart for chairman in 2022, those are coming out, where he was accused of race baiting. And now those articles are making the rounds. DiCianni politically hasn't had the greatest of weeks. And I don't know that he was ever really a real factor in this race for recorder, but I know there's a lot of Republicans who are sort of enjoying the schadenfreude here of watching him have some bad times leading up to what is likely a distant last place finish.
Never a dull moment in DuPage County. The first question I want to ask is, how the hell did DiCianni get the Jesse White endorsement? I mean, I saw Dave Nyack somehow got the Jesse White endorsement in the 20th district Senate race. It was rescinded. But I'm just thinking to myself, like, how the hell does someone like Dave Nyack get Jesse? Who is this guy? This guy's some random doctor guy. Like, how is he getting Jesse White's endorsement? So what I want to know is, what's Jesse White's price to get his endorsement? Because
listen, I can tell you exactly how it happens, because we've had clients who've gotten his endorsement. Jesse White is the nicest guy on the planet, and really it's the first person to ask him. That's who gets it. There's not a lot of critical thought that goes into it. It's literally just, he is a super nice dude, and if you see him at an event and you ask him, he'll say yes, and then you run with it. That's why people are saying, hey, maybe make sure that his political team agrees, because otherwise you're going to have a retraction in about 5 minutes. But that's how it happens.
And people are, that's what they're talking about. They want to get like a notarized thing, that like an affidavit saying, yes, I endorse this guy for this office, for this primary. Like, this is just so absurd. Like, Jesse White can't be that nice of a guy. But in any case, yeah, DiCianni, this is what happens when you're a Republican for 100 years and then decide to run in a Democratic primary. Like, of course, things you said when you were Republican are going to come out and bite you in the ass. I don't know what Buddy was expecting. Perhaps it's just a case, like we talked about at the beginning, was maybe DiCianni never entered this race to win. Maybe he just entered this race to split the vote and get somebody else elected. And if that's what he entered this race to do, and draw heat off the other candidates, then he did what he was supposed to do. God bless him.
Well, listen, I mean, the front runner, the Democratic front runner, is a friend and client of his, so it's perfectly plausible.
But if he entered this race to somehow win, then I don't know what to tell him, because if he never expected this stuff to come out about him, then he's, delusional.
You know what really wins here? It's the DiCianni printing machine.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, that is what it always comes down to. There's been countless times where DiCianni has called clients of ours. I'm sure, Dennis, you've had the same thing, where it's like, oh, yeah, I got you. I'm going to print your mail up for you, no problem. So my client comes to me and says, we can save money. Let's do it. And I say, yeah, I've seen this happen before. Let me tell you exactly how this is going to play out. And then a couple weeks later, DiCianni's like, where's my check? Where's my payment? I'm doing your mail for you. Why aren't I getting money? It's like, every stinking time. So my favorite text that I got, and I won't give the source, but my favorite text I got from a Politico was chickens coming home to roost for DiCianni, and it's not inaccurate. I mean, you can't piss people off for years and years and years and expect that they're not going to look for revenge. Listen, I'm not dumb enough to put my name on the ballot because there's a whole long list of people who'd come for revenge. Like, that's just what's going to happen in politics, and chickens are coming home to roost here. All right, let's keep moving. So next topic here. So this topic is going to get me in trouble for a different reason. So part of the reason why we started this podcast was we want to be able to share when people are doing things well, so we can all emulate them and learn from it. And when people are doing things not so well, we need to learn from it quickly and not make those same mistakes. So we're going to talk about House District 52. And the reason why I say it's going to get me in trouble is the candidate here, Marty McLaughlin, is a friend of mine, but an even better friend of my wife's. So when she watches this tomorrow, I am sure I'm going to get a kick in the shins. But we got to talk about this race because there's some things that happen that I think are errors, but maybe you guys will tell me that I'm wrong. First thing that was pointed out this week is Mike Lindell of My Pillow fame from Minnesota came to Illinois. And there you go. You have Marty McLaughlin taking a bunch of photos with Mike Lindell, photos that are not going to gain him any support because nobody actually knows Mike Lindell by face, at least not a swing voter. So this isn't going to gain him any support. And it's not like Lindell's going to donate to him. On the flip side, Democrats, I guarantee you, were licking their chops over Marty taking a photo with an election denier and somebody that close to Donald Trump. I think it was an error, but maybe you guys would disagree. And then the second thing he did was he organized a press conference on this grocery tax cut. So it wasn't that he just made a quote. He literally organized the press conference to oppose Pritzker's elimination of the grocery tax, which we talked last week and maybe even the week before, that eliminating the grocery tax is bad policy when it comes to local governments, but it's amazing politics. And when you're in a tier one, possibly race in the suburbs, going on record opposing a sales tax decrease on groceries is just not a smart political play. And yet here we are. So I'm curious if you guys agree or disagree with me on those two things being errors, and feel free to share your own thoughts on that race.
So I had McLaughlin probably losing this race anyway, not because of anything Marty's done or is or anything. It's just that this district's become so Democratic in the Trump era that it was only a matter of time before it managed to flip. He almost lost in 2022. So with Biden and Trump, with Trump on the top of the ticket, I expected it to be even worse for him.
Well, let's just clarify, where you're at, what you're saying there. You're talking about how the Senate district with McConkey really strongly trended towards Democrats, which is, now that same candidate is now going against McLaughlin. So just to clarify what you mean with all that.
I meant that the House district also has trended Democratic over it. No statewide Republican won this district, Collin, in 2022. Okay, I'm looking at the numbers. They're not as bad as people like to say. I still have this down as not that bad of a district, but you're right. It has trended Democrat and it does lean Democrat. But in any case, you don't enter into this district taking pictures with Mike Lindell, and you don't go advocating against a tax cut in Barrington, which hates taxes almost as much as it loves abortion. So these are political.
First of all, Barrington is not DuPage, so the loving abortion thing, you can save that for DuPage. But the point about taxes, the interesting thing is the Barrington mayor, who's a great friend. I mean, she was part of this press conference talking about how this is a hit to their budget. So local governments, here's Marty's play. Local governments do hate this tax cut. So if he wants to get the Karen Darches of the world and others to endorse him, that may be his play here. And Karen Darch is ridiculously popular, so that's not a bad thing. It's just with voters, the challenge here is eliminating that grocery tax. It's going to be a hard sell to voters to be against that because that's going to be ridiculously popular.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you're going to have to message that. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Let me just finish my point here. But the other end of this is with the Mike Lindell thing. It's not just like he was at an event with Mike Lindell and somebody happened to snack a picture of them two together. No, he went out of his way to take the picture and then posted on social media. It's like, this is my guy, Mike Lindell. We're fighting the woke lobby over here, which nobody knows because Ron DeSantis ruined the word woke. So nobody cares about the word woke anymore. And he's got his arm around the guy like, this is my dude right here. Like, what are you doing, buddy? Like, you're not running in Butler's neck of the woods where that might gain you a couple votes. Like, you're going to lose dozens of votes because of this one stupid picture you took. It's so funny, man. It's so terrible.
Mosely, what were you going to say?
Just to say, if I was there yesterday when Lindell was there, and we had a private meeting afterwards, and some of the stuff he shared was pretty interesting. But to your point, Marty's district is not district down here. Marty's quote, because I spent a lot of time with him at session. Marty's quote about where I live is, I can put on a red hat and drive around the district and get elected. You can't do that in Marty's district. But to your point about this grocery tax thing, Marty is one of the most skilled people that I know about thinking about messaging ideas, and he is really good. He's always on, and so I think you're right, Collin. I think his play towards getting local officials' support in this race is going to be really important, and that's what he's doing. Because on the House floor today, he stood up and said, I feel this way about this grocery tax because we haven't done this, and this for our local governments, which is the LGDF, the money we owe counties, cities, townships, whatever. So,
but Collin, let me ask you this. I mean, so if Marty is indeed as skilled at messaging as you say, which I think Marty is again, he's a friend, so I don't need to say more than that. There's a way to word this to not be against the tax cut. I mean, it's how you do things that matters. And to say you could be for the tax cut, but against the cut to local governments at the same time. So to say, hey, listen, I love what you're trying to do here, but don't screw our local governments in the process. So I'm going to sponsor a bill that will fix this problem where we can still cut the grocery tax and make sure we keep local governments whole. That's a positive narrative where you're not coming out against the grocery tax, but that's not what he's done here. He's handed Democrats a great nail piece to say that he's against this grocery tax cut. If that was the play, if the play was really get in bed with these local government leaders because they're super popular and they can help me win re-election, which that's a smart play, you could accomplish that while not making the dumb comment that's going to hurt you on mail pieces and TV ads.
Right. That was his speech today, but I know the press conference, that's not what the narrative was. So, maybe it's too far gone now, but it seems like that's the way he's going, but maybe it's damage is done.
You just got to say it once. That's all you got to say it. And it's going to be on 20 mail pieces and a bunch of TV ads. And that's where we're at now. So I think I do think there is some smart play here, but we talk about all the time on this podcast. It's not necessarily what you do, it's how you do it that will help you or hurt you. And in this case, the how initially maybe wasn't as buttoned up as it could have been. And that may come back to bite him. As Chris said, 52. I mean, here's the problem. If the House Republicans or just the Republican Party in general is spending money defending this district in 52, we're screwed because we can't be putting money into 45 and all these other districts that are so much more important if we're having to defend incumbents in districts that frankly shouldn't be in play. And so that's the challenge here is Marty needs to win this race without help from the GOP so the GOP can go in other districts. But doing stuff like this means we're going to have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend our incumbent in 52, which means it'll work. We'll maybe hold on to the seat, probably hold on to the seat. I don't think Chris is right. I think we still hold on to it, but we hold on to it after wasting six figures.
You win. So let's say you hold on to McLaughlin's seat. Well, who are you going to lose then? Maybe all the money you're spending on McLaughlin's seat is money you're not spending on Amy Grant. It's money you're not spending on Kevin Schmidt. It's not money you're not spending on that one random district in Champaign County that everyone's talking about, 105, the Marin district. So you're losing more than you're gaining by trying to save Marty McLaughlin after this issue. You're good. They're on defense anyway. The House Republicans are on defense. Anybody who tells you they're on offense is lying to themselves. The House Republicans are on defense in 2024 in terms of how many seats they're going to win and how many seats they're going to lose. And until people figure out where we're going to spend money to make sure that they don't lose 7 seats, they need to start thinking about races like this.
Well, listen, it's also just know when your opponent tells you why they're doing something, maybe listen. I mean, you look at the press conferences with Pritzker, and when they push him on this tax, what does he say? Go talk to the Republicans who wanted this, and I gave it to him. I'm summarizing, but he has said several times now in his press conferences, go talk to Republicans. When your opponent says, hey, look, this is why I did this, maybe listen. I mean, the whole reason they put this thing out there was because they knew it would put Republicans in a trick bag. And we still were like, okay, let's just dumbly walk into it. I mean, Pritzker and the Democrats did this on purpose to hurt Republicans, and we weren't smart enough to be like, maybe don't walk into the trap. So that's kind of the frustration is like maybe when your opponent tells you they're doing something to hurt you, take a breath, think about it, and don't be an idiot. All right. Well, I'm waiting for my wife to yell at me, and probably I'll get a call from Marty too, because I love the guy, and I don't listen. I want the guy to win, so I don't want to hurt him at all. I want us to do better in that race. So if you live anywhere near 52, make sure you're working in that race so we keep Marty in office. All right, we've talked about it a couple times now on these podcasts. We got to talk about IVF because we've got a different crew here, and I want to get your thoughts. In the last week, Democrats in Springfield have pushed multiple bills forward that would either protect or expand IVF, and I'm told more is coming. This is, as we've talked about, going to be a big issue. Democrats across the country are trying to hang IVF around Republicans' necks because it polls extremely well amongst voters, including even amongst evangelical voters, conservative voters, Republican voters, let alone swing voters, females, suburban voters. And so Democrats are going to use this up and down the ballot to try to hurt Republicans, and we're already seeing some movement in Springfield to start that process. So, question to you guys, what are you seeing in IVF, and what can Republicans do? I want to give kudos. Jim Karras, the Republican candidate in IL-10, came out with a statement supporting IVF. I have not seen a lot of Republicans do so. I understand why, like a Mike Bost wouldn't do it, or someone like that stuck in a tough primary. But for the rest, they should be out talking about IVF, and they haven't, which is driving me crazy, which is letting the left in the media paint us as anti-IVF, which is going to hurt us. So we need more to speak out on this. Kudos to Karras, and maybe some others have done it, and I just haven't seen it. But what are you guys seeing on IVF for the fall?
Well, after tonight, after the president talks about it in the State of the Union, correct? Is that right? I mean, we're going to have to talk about it, and we can't ignore it. I'm sorry. I'm in support of IVF. I know a lot of people who benefited from IVF, right? And I mean, I know some people have a different opinion of that, and I respect their opinion. But this issue is not. It is here now. It is right on your doorstep. You're going to have to talk about it, and whether you want to or not, women are going to want to know where you stand on this. I mean, suburban women, and again, using Reboletti's 45th district as an example, he's going to get asked. He's that opinion when he goes door to door. Women are going to want to know where he stands on that. Look, Republican, Democrat, Independent, moderate. There are several people who have benefited from IVF, who went out, they wanted a family, they got a family because of this great process, and I think people are going to, this is now going to be a conversation. Never would have guessed that a couple of weeks ago, right? This is now going to be a conversation that will be out there in the forefront for the foreseeable future. So this podcast here, we've got to be one of the first really think about it in the country to really address. You've done it now in a couple of weeks, right? We've talked about IVF. This issue, people aren't talking about it. So we're in the right. This is a good time to talk about it, gentlemen. So
yeah, well, Dennis, I look at the youngins that are on these other screens here, and maybe you and I are the only ones who are old enough politically to remember this, but it's like stem cell research. I remember in the early 2000s, it was all about embryonic stem cells, and now you haven't heard about that in 15 years in politics. I feel like IVF's the same, where there was a time when it was super controversial. I remember when my wife and I started the process, I had some very religious people in my life who I was concerned how they might feel about it. And every single one, when I eventually would talk to them about it, they said, we'll pray for you. That's amazing. Even if they personally disagreed, which I really love to see. And now, my wife and I are going to she's going to give birth to our first son because of IVF. So many people have that story. And as you said, Dennis, we're going to get asked this over and over, and Democrats are going to make sure of it. And so we're going to have to be solid on this issue.
We have to educate on the issue. People don't understand, they just hear this and people assume certain things. I think the process of IVF and, how you get to where we're at, is something that people need to understand, right? That, there's all these bad things. Everybody wants to turn around and say, well, you're making designer babies and you're doing these things. People just want a family, man. They want that. They want to have a child. They want a family. They want to bring somebody in this world, and they need help, right? And why not embrace that? Why not talk about that?
Especially, aren't we the party of pro-family? This should be, the NRSC put out a memo on this a week or so ago that we showed on the podcast, which I thought was brilliant. Republicans are pro-family. They're pro. You know what, Brad, I knew you were going to say something. I want to come back to this point. I want to pull up that memo because I don't want to screw up what they said, because I thought it was brilliant. Brad, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh, no. I was just going to say that I don't know how this even became an issue. All of a sudden you're listening and you're like, where did this come from? But, just as Dennis said, I think all of us probably know somebody who had to go through that, struggled to have kids. and for a party that is pro-family. I'm a guy, believe this or not, I have 5 kids. So, but I can't imagine if I had to go through not being able to have kids. So it's a very heartfelt subject to a lot of people. And to your point, Collin, gotta get this message right. There's this affects a lot of people on a very, very personal level. And when that happens, you can't be wrong on that issue.
Yeah. So here's the quote. Our candidates can demonstrate compassion, respect for family values, and a commitment to individual freedom. This approach aligns with the views of our electorate and the positions Republicans champion. And it was absolutely correct. I mean, it's that individual, let's leave these decisions to families and to individuals. These are Ronald Reagan tenets of the Republican Party that we should not be so afraid of talking about.
I think my thing with IVF is this. This all started because somebody walked into a clinic with an intent to do something that was nefarious. And so, I think when you're talking about regulating, this entire issue, for me, I think that somebody who intentionally does something to disrupt the health of an embryo is a whole different conversation than whether or not a family deserves to be able to use this to get pregnant, to have a family. Now having that conversation at a front door, probably not possible. Maybe it is with people that are not unreasonable, but that's my problem is like the Democrats do. They're taking an issue that specifically in this case was about somebody walking in, opening a cryogenic container, basically, of embryos, grabbing one, or however many he did, throwing them on the floor, and that's basically what happened. We're not talking about, medical malpractice or whatever.
And you understand that politics drives this. I mean, there's the bill in the Senate, Duckworth's bill, that has a poison pill in it that no Republican could ever support. And yet, so of course Republicans are saying we're not going to support this. And then the narrative is Republicans don't support IVF. It's like, no.
Right.
You purposely put a poison pill in there. When Trump told Republicans not to support the border wall, everyone's like, oh, that's hypocritical. But now when Democrats play the same game and play politics and put a little poison pill in the bill, that means no Republican could ever support it. So they can claim Republicans are against IVF. Suddenly no one wants to say, oh, that's all politics because, it's hypocritical, whatever. So I get it. You're right. I think beyond the hypocrisy and beyond politics, though, we're going to be facing this down ballot because the narrative is Republicans are extreme. The narrative is Republicans are anti-women. We can't govern. We're the big narrative of 2024 is going to be that Republicans are taking away your rights. And so they're going to frame this as you have a right to start a family and Republicans are going to try to keep you away from that. That's how this thing's going to be framed. And so it's not about the issue itself. It's about what does the issue prove? And we keep walking into the buzzsaw here of Republicans actually want to take away your rights. They don't believe in your rights. When, again, go back to 1980, we were all about your rights. They have flipped the narrative on us in 40 plus years. And if we don't fix that by November, we're going to be in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's keep moving along because I mentioned hypocrisy and we're over time, so we don't have a lot of time here. But I got to talk about a little bit of hypocrisy on the Democrats because we've done it a lot with Republicans. So let's talk about the Democrat who backed the Safety Act down in Springfield and is now putting forward a bill that would force Chicago businesses to hire security. I kid you not. A Democrat who is 100% for the far left agenda when it comes to crime in the city of Chicago, now wants to force banks, pawn shops, grocery stores, and gas stations in the city of Chicago to employ a guard whenever they're open. And by the way, no government assistance for this. It is an unfunded mandate that you must hire security. I've seen a lot about hypocrisy in Illinois, but this is just one of my favorites or least favorites, depending on your point of view. It just reeks of hypocrisy. But hey, what else would you expect from some of these Chicago legislators? But I just found this to be hilariously ironic. Anybody else?
It is. And the list of things you can go on and on about. I mean, what have we done? We've passed the Safety Act. We've restricted firearm ownership, and then the city of Chicago restricts firearm carry in its own. We've allowed illegal immigrants to flood into the city of Chicago, and now we want to force a business. And that's the thing too. This is everything else. This is an anti-business policy. what I see happening is these gas stations, especially going to self-service, no retail access, just pumps out there on the street, go up serve you gas. They're going to do what they can because I mean, what are you gonna have to pay this person? 50 grand, 40, that's a lot of money to bite off for a small business.
Yep.
So the way I like
most of these places are open,
Hold on,
7
Michael.
days
Go-
a week. So
Hold on, Michael. Go ahead, Chris.
the way I like to engage with this issue is that this is the most, pro-business thing that the Democrats do, because what they do is that they take away the rights of police. They take away the rights of the police to do their job and to protect individuals and all those things. So what you do is that you have privatization. Instead of, and this is mandated privatization, of course, but you have privatization. Like, you don't need police officers anymore. Just hire private security firms, and they'll be the police of the future. It's capitalism in its purest form, and it's.
But at the same time that the Chicago public schools have voted to remove police officers from classrooms and schools, or not classrooms, from schools, like that, I don't understand the dichotomy on this issue.
And they're going to hire private security guards in about 5 years, guarantee it. There's going to be some guy who gets that contract. Somebody's going to get that contract to be private security at Chicago public schools, and they're going to make a lot of money doing it.
I wonder who they're going to donate to along the way. Michael, What were you going to say?
I mean, a lot of these like grocery stores especially have such like small like profit margins, and then you're going to say, okay, you need like a security guard there to be there like the entire time that you're open, 7 days a week, sometimes, 12, 15 hours a day. Like, it's just absolutely insane. It's going to put a lot of these places out of business, especially in the lower income areas. And then we're going to have more food deserts than we already do.
Well, the ironic thing is our company's done a ton of polling nationwide for our outside of Illinois clients on a similar issue where actually there are other states that are looking into providing credits or grants to local businesses who hire security or some form of safety net to help on this issue of crime. So other states are looking at how do we help businesses be able to supplement our police to try to reduce crime. And in Illinois, it's reduce police and force businesses with no assistance. It's amazing. I'll tell you, the worst thing about dealing in Illinois politics is doing politics outside of Illinois, because it reminds you just how back-asswards this state is. And this is just another one of those issues.
Yeah, what does Butch Miller say? Meanwhile, in opposite land.
Right. When ironically we're living in opposite land.
Yeah.
Right. But here's the thing too. What are these security guards protecting or enforcing besides life? Because, we have the law in Illinois that says you can't pursue somebody or whatever for retail theft of below so many dollars. So are we going to actually let these security guards do their job for the establishment, or are they literally only there to stop violent crime? Or are they just going to stand at the door and watch you carry out your 17 bags of chips or whatever you take out of the convenience store? Have a nice day.
Have you done the math, Collin, that it's exactly 17 bags of chips to get away with it in Cook County?
I like chips.
Sounds like a young college kid who does that math and knows exactly how many Taco Bell runs they can do or chips they can steal. I like it.
Right.
I like it. Well, let's transition this into what will probably have to be our last topic of the week, since we're way over time. But looking at this issue, I mean, we've had this on the agenda to talk about for months. But the Chicago Board of Education just officially voted to remove police officers from schools. CPS has been escalating this war, whether it's over school choice. I mean, months ago, we've been trying to get to this and never have gotten to it in our agenda. But months ago, they came out with a resolution trying to move away from anything other than public schools in Chicago. So any sort of selective enrollment in schools. And then they came out talking about how they wanted to move away from police officers in schools. Now they've officially done that. I mean, you're seeing in Chicago, this progressive agenda is coming front and center in a big way. And I think it does open up opportunities for the rest of the state to continue to point to, as was talked about, how Chicago is an anomaly and most places don't want to be like Chicago. I'm betting even in Chicago, and we saw this when this vote happened, a lot of parents and people who I wouldn't call conservatives or far right, as they like to say, people from especially lower income communities say, wait a second, we need those cops in those schools. We want those cops in those schools, but their voice is not being heard on this. It's the far left progressive agenda that's being pushed forward. So Chris, I'll start with you since it's Chicago, but then I'm open to whoever else has thoughts here.
Well, like I said, I give it a couple of years and I'll just put the private security officers in there. But yeah, this is just pure ideological. This has nothing to do with the safety of the students. This has nothing to do with making them perform better in class. This is just the far left Chicago Teachers Union agenda being moved through the mouth of the mayor of Chicago, who I won't even say his name anymore, in order to get this done. This is going to have disastrous effects. I mean, schools are already a problem with the cops there in Chicago. Like, the cops can't do everything to save people in these schools, but with them not there at all, you have to imagine things are going to get worse before they get better. So, just stay tuned. I can't wait to see what the first thing that the first school shooting that happens.
Hold on. So,
no,
since you guys were nice enough to stop me when I couldn't get the district right, I will let you reword that before you get yourself in trouble. You can't wait.
Right. Let me reword that, of course. Thank you, Collin. I'm not looking forward to the first incident of violence that occurs at a Chicago public school because they removed a police officer.
But to your point, it's almost guaranteed to happen, which is the point you were trying to make.
Right. It's guaranteed to happen.
I think too, and as I serve as a reserve police officer for my hometown, and I've been a part of multiple school resource and school shooting drills. And, I can tell you that people that I work with, we're running straight into that building. Now, I know that the woke left, they take all the gun violence issues and the school shooting issues, and they point to the one or two instances where the police officers failed, to perform their duty effectively and in a timely manner. But overwhelmingly, there are other examples where they stopped the violence and saved lives. But these policy decisions, we're talking about removing cops from schools, but putting security guards at convenience stores. So, the Illinois Democrats care more about protecting bags of chips than they do about our children. That's literally what this means. And I know there's also a divide on the issue, though, because there is a Chicago Democrat who has a bill to reverse this policy from a state level. But that's what we've come to. We're going to hire security guards to protect gasoline, but take cops out of the place where our most precious Illinoisans are at, and that's our schools.
I have to commend you, Collin, because usually Lane and I afterwards have to come up with the subject line for the episode of what we're going to put out, but you just nailed it, so I'm just going to steal that. So well done. That gets the headline for today's episode. Illinois Democrats care more about protecting bags of chips than your kids. I like it. Well done.
Damn good messaging right there, man. That's some damn good messaging.
Well done. It's the hypocrisy that drives me crazy. It's what this does for kids, and it's seeing these in a lot of these neighborhoods. We've seen the polling. I know some of you guys have been involved with races throughout the city of Chicago too. You've seen the polling where most of these communities want more police presence, not less. And so going this route it politically seems stupid, let alone logically doesn't make a lot of sense. All right, well, let's close with that. I already taken up way more of your time than I promised. So let's go to each guest. We'll give you a chance to share your closing thoughts. Really appreciate you guys being with us. Dennis, any final thoughts you want to share to the audience?
Great to sit and talk with everybody today. Thanks for the opportunity, Collin. I know we tried to get this to work over the last month or so, but thank you for the opportunity, and I hope you have me back again in the future.
Absolutely. What's the domain for your website? I see you got the logo back there. Give people the domain.
StrideStrategies.com.
There you go, man. Cool. Appreciate you being here with us. Brad, final thoughts on your end?
Nope. I appreciate you guys entertaining me this week and all the weeks in the past as I watched the podcast. It was a unique experience to be on here. But, just as we were talking earlier, March 20th is going to come. And I think everybody needs to remember what the objective is after March 20th. So, let's fight it out right now, but we got to get going.
You heard it here first. The Unity party at Brad's house. He's paying for the booze.
Got that right.
There better be Busch Light.
All right, Collin. Final thoughts on your end.
Yeah, hey, so good to be here. Thanks for having me on. I always enjoy talking with the panelists. Whether you be on the conservative end of our party or the other end, like Brad said, March 19th is going to come and go, and the ultimate enemy is going to be faced in November. So I look forward to seeing how that plays out here in Illinois.
Well said. All right, Chris, don't scare me. What do you got?
Once again, everybody start your novenas for the campaign of Eileen O'Neill Burke, that Pogorski's polling is wrong yet again, and that she actually has a chance to win this race for the safety of the people who live in Cook County and not for the benefit of the Republicans in November. Thank you.
Michael, you get the final word, buddy. What do you got?
Hey, what do we got? Like 11 days left, and this primary is behind us, and then it's all hands on deck to make sure President Trump gets another term. So let's make it happen.
Right. I think in
That's
Illinois
beautiful.
we've got bigger priorities, but I know nationally I get your point.
Yeah, we'll get it done.
I mean, you're down in your region, isn't it? I mean, shouldn't we be talking about Schmidt and our big races down there? That's probably more important, right?
Yeah, absolutely. He's my state rep, so we've got to make sure he gets reelected. I don't want to be represented by Latoya Greenwood.
Whether you like Trump or don't like Trump, we can all agree Illinois is not in play for him. So our priorities will be a little bit different here in this state.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. Well, thank you to you guys. Thank you to Lane Davis, our producer, and to our viewers and watchers. Our next episode, which we'll release next Friday, is going to be the last one before the primary. So make sure you come back and hear the final word before these results come out. As always, we will have a portal that we'll make available to the public, to our right of center colleagues, that will have election results, analysis, all sorts of things for you to be able to watch as these results come in on election night. We'll share those details on next week's episode, so don't miss it. Thanks a lot, everybody.